After my divorce at 73, I had nowhere to sleep. My ex-husband laughed right in my face. He said, "Nobody wants a woman your age. You are finished." But then a quiet stranger walked up to me at the bus station and handed me an envelope. Inside was a letter from a law firm saying my late business partner had left me everything. $41 million. And one condition. Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to Auntie's Stories. I'm so glad you are here with me today. Please press the like button and stay with me all the way to the very end. And leave me a comment telling me what city or country you are listening from. I love to know how far these stories reach. 'Cause this story is mine. Every single word of it happened to me. My name is Dorothy. Dorothy Jean Abrams. Most people who knew me back in the day called me Da. Never in my life did I think I would be standing in a bus station at 73 years old with 2 garbage bags holding everything I owned and $40 folded inside my left shoe. Not after 40 years of giving everything I had to a man and a marriage and a home. Not after 4 decades of being the kind of woman who stayed. But that is exactly where I found myself on a warm Wednesday morning in August outside the Greyhound bus station in Clover Falls, Alabama, watching a janitor mop the same floor tile 3 times and wondering what direction my life was supposed to go next. My second husband, Raymond Abrams, had handed me a folded piece of paper on a Sunday afternoon and told me to read it. It was a signed divorce filing. He had already done it. Already filed it without a single conversation, without a single warning, without once looking me in the eye and telling me something was wrong. He said it was better this way. Clean. Like he was describing how he liked his kitchen counters wiped. Raymond and I had met at a retirement dinner for a mutual friend in the spring of 1983. He was a solid-looking man with a calm voice and a very organized desk. He managed a small private accounting firm in Clover Falls, and he carried himself like someone who paid close attention to detail. I was 44 years old when we married. A woman who had already buried one life before and learned the hard way that nothing stays the way you picture it. My first husband, Gerald Lee Combs, had passed very suddenly in the summer of 1974. We had been married only 4 years. He was 34 years old when a blood clot took him overnight while he slept beside me. And the life I thought we were building together simply collapsed like a chair someone had quietly removed all the screws from. I raised our daughter Renee on my own after Gerald passed. I worked as a bookkeeper for a small insurance office downtown for 14 years. Bent carefully. Grieved in the mornings before Renee woke up. Kept going because that child needed her mother present, not crumbling. Raymond walked into my life when I had very nearly stopped believing anyone would. And for a long stretch of years, he truly seemed like God's answer to a prayer I had stopped saying out loud. We built a steady life together on Magnolia Creek Road. Raymond's firm did well through the 80s and 90s. I kept the household, helped him organize client files during tax season, cooked every dinner, tended the garden he said he loved but never touched himself. We attended church every Sunday and Wednesday evening. We had the neighbors over for cookouts in the summer. We visited his mother in Birmingham each Thanksgiving. Ordinary life. And I had learned that ordinary life was the most valuable thing a person could hold. What I failed to see, and I will own this plainly, is that Raymond had always treated the financial side of our life as his territory alone. He paid everything. He filed everything. He kept every account in his name only. I had grown up watching my own mother hand my father the household money and trust him to manage it. So I simply did the same without question. Our home was titled to Raymond. The cars were his. The savings were his. I never once saw the full picture of what we owned together because he never showed me. The divorce moved through quietly and left me with a modest settlement, barely enough to cover 4 months of simple living, and the belongings I had carried into the marriage myself. My sewing basket. Renee's baby shoes that I had kept in a shoebox. My Bible. A cast iron skillet that had belonged to my grandmother. Raymond kept the house, both cars, and everything in the accounts. By August I had spent the last of my settlement on a weekly rate motel at the edge of Clover Falls. When that ran out, I packed what I could carry into 2 garbage bags and I walked to the bus station because it was air-conditioned and open and I did not know where else to go. Renee lived 2 states away in Memphis with her husband and 3 young children. She called me every few days and begged me to come. I told her no every time. She had a full house and a tight budget and a husband who worked double shifts. I was not going to press myself into my daughter's life and make everything harder. So I sat in the Clover Falls bus station most of the day and slept at the Women's Resource Shelter on Grove Street each night. The shelter was decent. The staff was gentle. But I was 73 years old and I had spent 40 years believing I was building toward a safe and settled ending. Lying on a narrow cot listening to strangers breathe in the dark was not something I had a proper word for yet. And then I heard through my neighbor Charlene, who still lived on Magnolia Creek Road and kept me quietly updated on things, that Raymond had let a woman named Patrice move into the house within 6 weeks of our divorce being finalized. Charlene told me this gently, watching my face like she was ready to catch me. She also told me what Raymond had said at the neighborhood association meeting when one of the other women asked where I had gone. Raymond had leaned back in his chair, smiled his quiet accountant smile, and said, "Dorothy chose this. Women her age who can't adapt have to figure out what comes next on their own. Nobody can carry a person forever." I held those words inside me for a long time. Turned them over. Let them show me exactly what they were and who had said them and why they could not be allowed to define me. Then I set them down somewhere where they could not do damage and I went back to thinking clearly. Because clear thinking was what I needed. It was a Thursday morning in the 3rd week of August. The bus station was warm and smelled like floor cleaner and stale coffee. I was sitting in a plastic seat near the front window with my 2 garbage bags at my feet and a travel magazine someone had left behind, reading an article about the coast of Portugal that I would probably never see. A woman came and stood near me. She looked perhaps 50 years old. Professional clothes, a small briefcase, reading glasses pushed up on top of her head. She looked at me carefully and said, "Excuse me, are you Dorothy Jean Abrams, formerly Dorothy Jean Combs?" I looked up and said I am. She sat down 2 seats away, which I noticed and appreciated. She was not crowding me. She said her name was Carol Sims. She was a legal representative from a firm in Charlotte, North Carolina. She said she had been trying to locate me for nearly 2 months. I stared at her. She said, "Mrs. Abrams, I need to share some information with you and I need you to hear all of it before you say anything at all." I nodded. She opened her briefcase, set a folder across her knees and said, "Your first business partner. From your years in the garment trade, a woman named Ida Louise Perry, passed away quietly last month in Charlotte." I felt my chest tighten. Ida. I had not spoken to Ida in years. Long years. Carol Sims continued. She said, "Mrs. Perry founded a textile distribution company in 1978, 4 years after your partnership ended. That company grew substantially over the following decades. Her estate has been assessed at approximately $41 million. I paused. She looked at me directly. She said, "You are named as the primary beneficiary of that estate, Mrs. Abrams. Ida left it to you." The travel magazine slipped off my lap onto the station floor. I did not reach for it. Could not speak. Not a single word came up from my throat. Carol Sims gave me a moment. Then she said, "There is one condition attached." She did not tell me the condition right there in the bus station. She said it required a formal meeting with the full documents present. She wrote down an address and a time on a card and gave to me. She stood, picked the travel magazine up from the floor, placed it carefully on the seat beside me, and said she would see me tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock at the address on the card. And then she walked away through the sliding glass doors into the bright August sun. I sat in that plastic seat for a very long time after she left. Families moved through the station around me. A small child ran in circles. An announcement came over the speakers. And I sat there very still, trying to fit this new and enormous thing into the shape of the life I was currently living and finding it would not quite go. Ida Louise Perry. Let me tell you who Ida was to me because you need to understand this part clearly. In 1969, I was 30 years old and working as a seamstress in a small alterations shop in Birmingham. Ida walked in one afternoon needing the hem let down on a winter coat and ended up staying 3 hours because we could not stop talking. She was 32, sharp as a tack. Funny in the dry way that makes you laugh before you realize you are laughing. She had a dream of starting a small garment business. Modest clothing made well at reasonable prices, and she asked me if I would consider becoming her partner. I had $700 saved. She had $900. We put it together and we started Combs and Perry Originals out of her aunt's garage in 1971. For 3 years we sewed and sold and built something real. We had 8 wholesale accounts and a small retail space by the time Gerald died in 1974. After Gerald passed, I fell apart quietly. I told Ida I needed to step back. She understood. She bought out my share for what felt like a generous amount at the time. We stayed close for a few more years. Then life moved us in different directions the way it does. Letters became fewer, phone calls shorter. And then the silence between us grew so comfortable we forgot to break it. I had no idea she had kept building. No idea at all what she had turned those 2 years of our shared work into. And I had absolutely no idea she had been thinking of me all that time. The address Carol Sims had given me was a small law office on the 2nd floor of a building on Commerce Street in downtown Clover Falls. I arrived at 9:45 the next morning carrying one of my garbage bags because I was not going to leave both unattended at the shelter. I sat in a waiting area with a ceiling fan turning slowly and a potted fern that looked like it needed water. And I waited. At exactly 10 o'clock, Carol Sims came out and led me into a quiet office where a second attorney, a man named Howard Bell who managed the Charlotte estate side, had joined by telephone. They walked me through the condition. I'm going to tell you what the condition was because it matters to this story. Ida's condition was this. In order to receive the estate, I had to agree to use no less than 15% of the total assets to fund a vocational training program for women over the age of 60 who were rebuilding their financial lives. Ida had written a specific paragraph in the trust about this. Carol Sims read it aloud. It said, Dorothy Combs saw something in women that other people missed. She saw that they were capable far past the point when the world stopped looking. I want her to prove it with this. I sat in that chair in that small office with the ceiling fan turning and the fern needing water, and I felt something crack open quietly inside me. Not break. Open. The way a window opens when you have been in a closed room too long. Told them yes. Without hesitation and without conditions of my own. Told them yes. The legal process began moving the following week. Howard Bell handled the Charlotte end. Carol Sims managed what needed to be done locally. I was advised to secure stable housing as quickly as possible so there would be a proper address on file for the estate documents. Carol Sims, who I was coming to understand, was a woman who handled practical problems the same way she handled legal documents, which is to say efficiently and without fuss, connected me with a property manager she knew personally. By the end of the week, I had moved into a furnished rental apartment on Sycamore Lane. It had 2 bedrooms and a small porch with a ceiling fan and a kitchen that caught the morning light from the east. I stood in that kitchen on the first morning and drank coffee I had made myself in a pot I had bought the day before, and I cried. Not from sadness. From the simple, overwhelming strangeness of having walls around me that were mine. I called Renee that evening. I told her only that the housing situation had resolved and she did not need to worry. She said, Mom, something in your voice sounds different. I said it might. She said, different how? I said we will talk about it properly soon. She was quiet for a moment and then she said, okay. She trusted me. She had always trusted me even when I did not entirely deserve it. And that trust, that simple quiet faith my daughter had in me, was something I had been carrying very carefully for a long time and intended to keep deserving. The estate transfer process moved in the measured, deliberate way that legal processes move. There were documents to review and sign. There were assessments. There were conference calls with Howard Bell and the Charlotte team. There were moments when the number 41 million appeared on a printed page in front of me and I had to. She sat down 2 seats away, which I noticed and appreciated. She was not crowding me. She said her name was Carol Sims. She was a legal representative from a firm in Charlotte, North Carolina. She said she had been trying to locate me for nearly 2 months. I stared at her. She said, "Mrs. Abrams, I need to share some information with you and I need you to hear all of it before you say anything at all." I nodded. She opened her briefcase, set a folder across her knees and said, "Your first business partner. From your years in the garment trade, a woman named Ida Louise Perry, passed away quietly last month in Charlotte." I felt my chest tighten. Ida. I had not spoken to Ida in years. Long years. Carol Sims continued. She said, "Mrs. Perry founded a textile distribution company in 1978, 4 years after your partnership ended. That company grew substantially over the following decades. Her estate has been assessed at approximately $41 million. He paused. She looked at me directly. She said, "You are named as the primary beneficiary of that estate, Mrs. Abrams. Ida left it to you." The travel magazine slipped off my lap onto the station floor. I did not reach for it. Could not speak. Not a single word came up from my throat. Carol Sims gave me a moment. Then she said, "There is one condition attached." She did not tell me the condition right there in the bus station. She said it required a formal meeting with the full documents present. She wrote down an address and a time on a card and gave to me. She stood, picked the travel magazine up from the floor, placed it carefully on the seat beside me, and said she would see me tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock at the address on the card. And then she walked away through the sliding glass doors into the bright August sun. I sat in that plastic seat for a very long time after she left. Families moved through the station around me. A small child ran in circles. An announcement came over the speakers. And I sat there very still, trying to fit this new and enormous thing into the shape of the life I was currently living and finding it would not quite go. Ida Louise Perry. Let me tell you who Ida was to me because you need to understand this part clearly. In 1969, I was 30 years old and working as a seamstress in a small alterations shop in Birmingham. Ida walked in one afternoon needing the hem let down on a winter coat and ended up staying 3 hours because we could not stop talking. She was 32, sharp as a tack. Funny in the dry way that makes you laugh before you realize you are laughing. She had a dream of starting a small garment business, modest clothing made well at reasonable prices, and she asked me if I would consider becoming her partner. I had $700 saved. She had $900. We put it together and we started Combs and Perry Originals out of her aunt's garage in 1971. For 3 years we sewed and sold and built something real. We had 8 wholesale accounts and a small retail space by the time Gerald died in 1974. After Gerald passed, I fell apart quietly. I told Ida I needed to step back. She understood. She bought out my share for what felt like a generous amount at the time. We stayed close for a few more years. Then life moved us in different directions the way it does. Letters became fewer, phone calls shorter. And then the silence between us grew so comfortable we forgot to break it. I had no idea she had kept building. No idea at all what she had turned those 2 years of our shared work into. And I had absolutely no idea she had been thinking of me all that time. The address Carol Sims had given me was a small law office on the 2nd floor of a building on Commerce Street in downtown Clover Falls. I arrived at 9:45 the next morning carrying one of my garbage bags because I was not going to leave both unattended at the shelter. I sat in a waiting area with a ceiling fan turning slowly and a potted fern that looked like it needed water. And I waited. At exactly 10 o'clock, Carol Sims came out and led me into a quiet office where a second attorney, a man named Howard Bell who managed the Charlotte estate side, had joined by telephone. They walked me through the condition. I'm going to tell you what the condition was because it matters to this story. Ida's condition was this. In order to receive the estate, I had to agree to use no less than 15% of the total assets to fund a vocational training program for women over the age of 60 who were rebuilding their financial lives. Ida had written a specific paragraph in the trust about this. Carol Sims read it aloud. It said, Dorothy Combs saw something in women that other people missed. She saw that they were capable far past the point when the world stopped looking. I want her to prove it with this. I sat in that chair in that small office with the ceiling fan turning and the fern needing water, and I felt something crack open quietly inside me. Not break. Open. The way a window opens when you have been in a closed room too long. Told them yes. Without hesitation and without conditions of my own. Told them yes. The legal process began moving the following week. Howard Bell handled the Charlotte end. Carol Sims managed what needed to be done locally. I was advised to secure stable housing as quickly as possible so there would be a proper address on file for the estate documents. Carol Sims, who I was coming to understand, was a woman who handled practical problems the same way she handled legal documents, which is to say efficiently and without fuss, connected me with a property manager she knew personally. By the end of the week, I had moved into a furnished rental apartment on Sycamore Lane. It had 2 bedrooms and a small porch with a ceiling fan and a kitchen that caught the morning light from the east. I stood in that kitchen on the first morning and drank coffee I had made myself in a pot I had bought the day before, and I cried. Not from sadness. From the simple, overwhelming strangeness of having walls around me that were mine. I called Renee that evening. I told her only that the housing situation had resolved, and she did not need to worry. She said, "Mom, something in your voice sounds different." I said it might. She said, "Different how?" I said, "We will talk about it properly soon." She was quiet for a moment and then she said, "Okay." She trusted me. She had always trusted me even when I did not entirely deserve it. And that trust, that simple quiet faith my daughter had in me, was something I had been carrying very carefully for a long time and intended to keep deserving. The estate transfer process moved in the measured, deliberate way that legal processes move. There were documents to review and sign. There were assessments. There were conference calls with Howard Bell and the Charlotte team. There were moments when the number 41 million appeared on a printed page in front of me and I had to simply breathe through it because my brain kept insisting it must be a typographical error. Carol Sims walked me through each stage without rushing and without condescension. I asked every question I had. She answered every one. One afternoon during the 3rd week, she set down her pen and looked at me and said, "Mrs. Abrams, I have handled a significant number of inheritance cases in my career. Most people in your position spend the early weeks asking how to spend the money. You have spent 3 weeks asking how to set up the vocational fund properly." She said it like an observation. I said I had waited 40-some years for the chance to do something that actually mattered past my own 4 walls. I was not going to waste the first opportunity that came. She looked at me for a moment and then she wrote something on her notepad and turned it back to the documents. I have thought about that moment since then, and I believe what she wrote was something she intended to keep to herself. It's fine. Some things belong only to the person who observed them. Meanwhile, in the background of all this careful legal work, something else was developing that I had not anticipated, and that required its own kind of navigation. Raymond had connections in Clover Falls. He had been a respected accountant in that community for over 30 years and he had friends who told him things. It took 3 weeks from the time Carol Sims first approached me in the bus station for the information to reach him. I know precisely when it reached him because Charlene called me and said Raymond had come over to her house on a Saturday morning with a bottle of good wine and a very relaxed and friendly manner, and had spent 45 minutes asking careful questions about where I was living and whether I seemed well and whether I had been in contact with any lawyers recently. Charlene, who is one of the sharper human beings I have ever known, had given him sweet tea, said she had no idea, and called me the moment his car left her driveway. I appreciated that woman deeply. What Raymond did next I did not learn until later, but I will tell you now because it belongs in the right order of the story. He contacted an estate attorney of his own. He put forward the argument that as my husband of 40 years, he had a potential interest in the outcome of the Perry estate based on the period of our marriage overlapping with years during which my professional identity as Ida's original partner had theoretically built value. This was not an argument grounded in strong legal footing. Howard Bell explained it to me with the measured patience of someone who has seen many poorly grounded arguments in his career and knew exactly how they ended. But it created a delay. A formal challenge requires a formal response, and formal responses take time. Carol Sims told me to carry on with the process, continue setting up the foundation structure, continue building the ordinary days of my new life, and allow the legal system to handle what the legal system was built to handle. So I did. I bought a proper kitchen table. Dark wood. Solid. For chairs. I planted 2 small pots of herbs on the porch because I had always wanted herbs growing somewhere I could reach them easily. I found a fabric shop on the far side of Clover Falls and I bought good cotton in 3 colors, and I started a quilt I had been designing in my head for 20 years. My sewing basket sat on the footstool beside my good chair, and the light came through the east window every morning, and everything about my small apartment felt chosen in a way that no space had felt since Gerald's first apartment, which we had furnished together piece by piece from thrift stores and yard sales in the early years of our marriage. I called Renee on a Tuesday evening and told her everything. I want to describe that phone call to you because it was one of the most important conversations of my life. I had planned what? Say. I had actually written a few notes on a piece of paper so I would not skip anything essential or say it in the wrong order. But the moment Renee picked up and said "Mama" in that particular way she had said it since she was small, I set the notes down and just talked. I told her about the bus station and Carol Sims. I told her about Ida and the company Ida had built. I told her about the condition and the foundation and the 41 million. Renee was very quiet through most of. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "Mama, you sat in a bus station with 2 garbage bags and you didn't call me." I said, "You had enough." She said, "I had a phone." I said, "Renee." She said, "Mama." And then we were both quiet for a moment, and the quiet was full of 30 years of the particular understanding that builds between a mother and a daughter who have weathered things together. She said she was coming to Clover Falls that weekend. Told her. She absolutely was not going to disrupt her family's schedule for this. She said she was bringing the children. I said the apartment only had 2 bedrooms. She said she had heard hotels existed in Clover Falls. I said she was stubborn. She said she got it from somewhere. I laughed. I had not laughed with my full chest in longer than I could properly measure. It felt like putting on a coat I had forgotten I owned and discovering it still fit. Renee arrived on a Friday evening with her husband, Marcus, who is a decent and steady man, and their 3 children, ages 8, 11 and 14. The 14-year-old, my granddaughter Brianna, walked into my apartment, looked around with a direct and unfiltered assessment that 14-year-olds conduct on every space they enter, and said, "Grandma, this place has good bones." I did not know what that meant exactly, but I received it as high praise from a 14-year-old and thanked her accordingly. We had dinner at my kitchen table. All 6 of us at a table that only had 4 chairs, which meant Marcus sat on the small step stool from the kitchen, and Brianna sat on the porch chair dragged inside, and nobody complained. After the children were settled in the bedroom with the television on low, Renee and I sat on the porch with decaffeinated coffee and the night air coming soft and warm, and she looked at me for a long time and then she said, "Tell me about Ida." So I did. I told her everything I have told you. About the alteration shop and the coat and the $900–700 and the garage and Combs and Perry Originals and the 8 wholesale accounts and the small retail space, and then Gerald dying and me stepping away and Ida buying me out and the silence growing comfortable between us until we forgot to break it. Renee listened to all of it. When I finished, she said, "She never forgot you." Said no. He didn't. Renee was quiet. Then she said, "What are you going to do with the foundation?" I told her what I had been thinking. A training program for women over 60 who needed to learn or relearn skills that could bring in real income. Sewing, bookkeeping, small business basics, computer skills. Renee put her coffee cup down and looked at me with an expression I recognized because she had worn it since she was 8 years old, which was the expression of someone who has just decided something without fanfare. She said, "I want to help build it." Said her job was in Memphis. She said she worked remotely 3 days a week and that the drive to Clover Falls was 6 hours and that she had been thinking about a career shift for the past 2 years anyway, and that this felt like the kind of work that meant something real. I looked at my daughter on that small porch with the herbs in their pots and the night coming in soft around us, and I thought about all the years I had tried not to need too much from her. All the times I had said I am fine when I was not. All the times I had stayed quiet so she could have her life without my weight in it. I said, "If you want to help build it, I would like that very much." She said, "Good." She picked her coffee back up. Then she said, "You should have called me from the bus station." I said, "I know." She said, "Don't ever do that again." I said, "I won't." We sat on the porch until late, and the night was warm and the city was quiet and the herbs smelled like something living. Monday morning came and Renee took the children back to Memphis, and Marcus shook my hand and said, "Mrs. Abrams, you are a remarkable woman," in the sincere and slightly formal way that decent sons-in-law say such things. And I told him he was a good man and I meant it. After they left, I stood in my kitchen with my coffee and the morning light and felt the particular richness of having had people in my home and chosen the quiet that followed it rather than having the quiet imposed on me. That is a distinction that matters more than most people recognize until they have felt both kinds. Raymond's legal challenge moved forward on its slow and predictable path. Howard Bell had filed the formal response. Carol Sims kept me updated in brief, clear summaries after each development. The core of Raymond's argument rested on the idea that my professional identity and business relationships formed during our marriage were marital assets. Howard Bell explained that this argument required demonstrating that my partnership with Ida had produced ongoing value during the marriage, which it had not, since Ida had bought me out completely before Raymond and I had ever met. The timeline was clear and documented. The partnership ended in 1974. Raymond and I married in 1983. There was a 9-year gap between the two events that Raymond's attorney was going to have difficulty filling with anything substantial. Carol Sims said the challenge would likely be withdrawn before it reached a formal hearing. I received this information calmly. I had decided early in this process that I was not going to spend energy on Raymond or on anything Raymond chose to do. I had done that for 40 years. That particular practice was finished. Instead, I was spending my energy on the foundation structure. Carol Sims connected me with a nonprofit consultant named Beverly Marsh who had spent 20 years helping people establish charitable organizations from scratch. Beverly was a small, precise woman with a binder full of color-coded tabs who came to my apartment on a Wednesday morning, looked at what I had sketched out on paper for the program and said, "This is further along than most people come to me with. Let's get it properly built." We named it the Ida Perry Foundation for Women's Renewal. I chose that name without much deliberation. It felt immediately right and I saw no need to adjust things that felt immediately right. Beverly walked me through the legal filing, the board structure, the program outline, the geographic scope for the first year. We decided to start in Alabama, building 3 initial cohorts, 1 in Clover Falls, 1 in Birmingham, 1 in Mobile. Each cohort would run 12 weeks and teach 4 core skill areas: practical sewing and alterations, basic bookkeeping and household financial management, small business fundamentals, and what Beverly called digital navigation, which was a gentle way of saying using computers and phones and the internet in ways that created income and independence, rather than confusion. I wanted each session to be taught by women who had actually done the thing they were teaching. Not instructors in the academic sense, women who had run the businesses and kept the books and hemmed the garments and found their own way through. Beverly nodded at this and wrote it into the program design without comment. I appreciated that she did not explain to me why this was a good idea. She simply heard it and recorded it, which is the mark of someone who knows when the person across from them already understands what they are saying. One afternoon in late September, Charlene came by the apartment. We had remained in careful contact since the divorce, and she was the kind of woman who showed up with a casserole when the situation called for it and good information when the situation called for that. She came with both. She set the casserole dish on my stove and sat at my kitchen table and told me that word had officially spread throughout the Magnolia Creek Road neighborhood about the estate and the foundation. She said it had spread in the way that significant information spreads in established neighborhoods, which is to say completely and with a great deal of editorial addition. She said several of Raymond's friends' wives had called him and asked if the story was true, and that Raymond had apparently confirmed it with a single word, which was yes, and then said nothing further. Charlene also said that Patrice had begun asking pointed questions about Raymond's own financial arrangements, and that the mood on Magnolia Creek Road had shifted in ways she described as interesting. I told Charlene I did not feel satisfaction about any of that. She looked at me with the expression of someone who has known a person long enough to evaluate the accuracy of what they are saying. She said, "Really?" I said, "Not the kind of satisfaction that sits comfortably." She said that was probably the honest answer, and we both ate casserole, and the afternoon light came through my kitchen window in the way that afternoon light comes through kitchen windows in September in Alabama, warm and low and the color of something peaceful. October arrived. The estate transfer had cleared its major legal requirements. Howard Bell called to confirm the primary disbursement had been approved and would be processed within the standard window. Carol Sims sent a formal letter to Raymond's attorney noting that the challenge had been reviewed and found to have no credible legal basis and inviting them to withdraw it without further proceedings. They withdrew it within 4 days. I received this news from Carol Sims by telephone on a Tuesday afternoon while I was sitting on my porch potting a third herb that I had decided the porch needed, which was rosemary, because rosemary is sturdy and smells like something that knows what it is. Thanked her. She said, "This is the part of my work I find satisfying." I said I found it fairly satisfying myself. She laughed. It was the first time I had heard her laugh, and it was a good laugh, genuine and short. I liked it. Beverly Marsh had completed the formal non-profit filing by mid-October. The Ida Perry Foundation for Women's Renewal received its provisional approval faster than Beverly had anticipated, which she attributed to the clarity of the program documents and the strength of the financial backing. We held a small informal meeting at my apartment at the end of October to look at the first cohort applications. Renee drove up from Memphis for it. Beverly brought her color-coded binder. Carol Sims came because she had told me she wanted to see what the first application round looked like, which I chose to interpret as personal interest rather than professional monitoring. We sat at my kitchen table with 4 chairs and 1 stool again, and we spread the applications out and we read them. 63 applications for 12 spots in the first Clover Falls cohort. Women ranging in age from 61 to 78. Each application had a section asking the applicant to describe in their own words why they were applying. I had written that section of the application form myself, and Beverly had kept it almost exactly as I had written it, changing only 1 word. I want to read you several of the answers we saw that evening because I think they deserve to be heard. One woman wrote, "I was a good wife for 44 years and then my husband died and I discovered I did not know how to balance a checking account or file my own taxes or ask for anything." Another woman wrote, "I am 67 years old and my children keep offering to take care of me and I love them, but I would very much like to be the kind of woman who does not need taking care of." A third woman, 72 years old, wrote a single sentence. She wrote, "I have been invisible for 11 years and I would like to change that." I read that one out loud at the table and then I was quiet for a moment and no one said anything because there was nothing to say that was more than what that sentence already held. We selected 12 women that evening. Beverly created the official letters. Renee suggested we add a handwritten note with each letter, something personal, not long, just a sentence or 2 so the women knew they were being seen as individuals and not as applications. We all agreed. I wrote every note myself. Took 2 evenings. I want to tell you that those 2 evenings of sitting at my kitchen table writing those 12 short notes were among the most purposeful hours I had experienced in a very long time. Perhaps ever. November came and with it the first full session of practical sewing instruction. I led this one myself because sewing was mine. I had done it my whole life and I knew its rhythms and I knew where people got stuck and where the satisfaction lived. I brought my own sewing basket, the one that had come through the garbage bags and the shelter in the furnished apartment, and I set it on the table at the front of the room and I told the women that whatever skill they were building, they had to have their own tools. Their own tools in their own hands. Not borrowed. Not shared. Their own. Because the confidence lives in the ownership of the instrument. One woman, her name was Louise, 64 years old and recently separated, held up her scissors and said, "I've had these scissors for 30 years. My ex-husband tried to take them in the settlement." I said, "I see you kept them." She said, "He didn't try very hard." The room laughed. Real laughter. The kind that comes from women who understand each other. By the time Christmas arrived, the first cohort was 6 weeks in, and the energy in that fellowship hall every session was something I did not have an adequate word for, so I will simply say it felt like rooms feel when people inside them are becoming more themselves. Renee came for Christmas. She drove up with the children and Marcus, and they filled my apartment with noise and wrapping paper, and the particular beautiful chaos of 3 grandchildren who have decided that grandmother's porch herb garden is in need of their personal supervision. Brianna, the 14-year-old, spent 45 minutes repotting the rosemary with a seriousness that I found deeply endearing and did not interrupt. On Christmas evening, after the children were asleep, Renee and I sat on the porch again with our decaf and the night around us, and she said, "Mama, what does this feel like?" "All of it." I thought about it honestly for a moment. I said it felt like I had spent a very long time living in a house where all the windows had been painted over, and then one morning someone handed me a scraper. She was quiet. Then she said, "That's a good way to put it." I said Ida had handed me the scraper. She said, "You did the work though." I said we would have to disagree on the proportions. She smiled. The new year came. The Clover Falls cohort completed their 12 weeks in late January with a small graduation ceremony in the fellowship hall that the pastor opened with a prayer so full of genuine feeling that 2 women cried before he was even finished. Each woman received a certificate and a small personal toolkit assembled by Beverly specifically for their identified skill area. Rosalie, the bookkeeping instructor, had brought a gift for each woman, a simple pocket ledger with their name printed on the front. The 72-year-old who had written about being invisible for 11 years, her name was May, stood up when it was her turn and said, "3 months ago I did not think anyone was looking at me. Today I know that I see myself, and that is the most important set of eyes." The room went quiet again in the good way. In February, the Birmingham cohort began. In March, mobile. Beverly managed the logistics with her color-coded binder and her precise and efficient manner, and I was deeply grateful for her. Renee worked 3 days a week remotely from a desk she had set up in the second bedroom of my apartment, and was beginning conversations with a university extension program about partnering with the Foundation for Curriculum Development. Things were moving. Not loudly. Not with fanfare. But steadily and with clear direction. Which I had come to understand was the way the best things moved. In the spring, I received a call from a journalist at a Birmingham newspaper who had heard about the foundation and wanted to write a feature. I thought about it for several days before agreeing. When she came to interview me, she asked a question toward the end of our conversation that I have thought about many times since. She said, "Mrs. Abrams, if you could tell other women your age one thing, what would it be?" I did not answer immediately. I looked out my east-facing window where the morning light was doing what it did every morning, coming in clean and direct and not asking anyone's permission. I said, "The world has a habit of treating older women like a sentence that is already finished. But a sentence is only finished when the person speaking it decides to stop. Don't stop." She wrote that down. I watched her write it. Thought about the bus station, the 2 garbage bags, the $40 in my shoe, the travel magazine about Portugal sliding off my lap, Carol Sims sitting 2 seats away with her briefcase and her careful eyes, and Ida who never forgot me across all those decades of silence, who built something extraordinary and then decided that the right ending for it was to give it to the woman she had started with. I had not been able to go to Ida's memorial service. It had been held while Carol Sims was still looking for me. I had not known. When I learned the date, I went to my porch on a Sunday morning and I made good tea and I sat in my chair with the morning around me and I talked to Ida the way you talk to someone when words are the only vehicle you have left and you trust them to travel. I told her I had said yes to the condition. I told her the foundation had its name. I told her about May and the 11 years of invisibility and the good quiet that had come over the room when May said she could see herself now. I told her that the rosemary on the porch was doing well, and that my granddaughter had repotted it with great seriousness on Christmas evening. I told her the morning light through my east window was exceptional. Thanked her. Not for the money. Well, for the money too, I am not going to pretend otherwise. But mostly for the act of remembering me. For deciding that what we had built together in that garage in Birmingham in 1971 had mattered enough to carry forward. For understanding something about me that I had partly lost sight of myself. That I was not finished. The spring in Clover Falls came warm and gradual the way Alabama springs do, pressing gently against winter until winter simply gives way. The dogwoods came up and the mornings smelled like green things growing, and the light had the particular quality of light that follows a hard season and makes everything feel as though it has more room than it did before. I walked to the fabric shop on Saturday mornings and came back with something bright in a paper bag. I went to the farmer's market on Sunday with Charlene, who had become my regular Sunday companion in the good and undemanding way of friendships built on simply liking each other's company. Beverly sent me the enrollment numbers for the second round of cohorts. 112 applications for 36 spots. I read that number several times. 112 women over the age of 60 who had heard about the program and decided they were not finished yet. I called Beverly and told her we needed to discuss expanding the cohort sizes. She already had a proposal written. Course she did. Raymond had sold the Magnolia Creek Roadhouse by March. Charlene told me this without particular drama. She said Patrice had moved out before the listing went up. She said Raymond had bought a smaller place on the other side of town near his brother's house. I received this information the same way. I receive information about weather in places I no longer live. Relevant once. Not anymore. My life was on Sycamore Lane with the east window and the herbs and the women in the fellowship hall and the 112 applications and Renee working from the second bedroom and Brianna calling me every Sunday to check on the rosemary as though she had become its official steward, which perhaps she had. I had arrived at something I did not have a single tidy word for, so I will use several. I had arrived at a life that was mine. Not built around someone else's needs. Not maintained in service of someone else's comfort. Not made smaller so that another person had more room. Chosen. Rooted. Useful in a direction that mattered to me. The park bench and the garbage bags and the $40 and Raymond's laughing dismissal at the neighborhood meeting were part of the story that had brought me here. I did not wish them away. You do not wish away the road that carried you to the right place. You simply acknowledge it and face forward. I want to tell you one last thing about Ida before I finish. When Carol Sims had delivered the final estate documents for my signature, she had included a separate sealed envelope marked personal. Inside was a photograph. It was from 1972. Ida and I are standing in the garage in Birmingham in front of a long table covered in fabric samples. We are both laughing, looking at something off to the side of the camera. Neither of us is looking. The lens. We do not know we are being photographed. We are just two women in a garage laughing at something in 1972, and we have no idea what is coming, and we are entirely unafraid. I put that photograph in a small frame and it sits on my kitchen windowsill where the morning light hits it first. Some mornings I look at it and I say, "We did good, Ida." She cannot answer, but I believe she hears. Because the women sitting in those fellowship hall circles hear. 'Cause May can see herself now. Because 112 women applied and we are building room for more. The inheritance was $41 million. But Ida's real gift was the reminder that I had never been finished. That the person I was at 30, laughing in a garage with $900 in a dream, was the same person who sat in a bus station at 73 with 2 garbage bags and decided to say yes to one more beginning. She was always there. She had just been waiting for the right envelope to arrive. I want to ask you something before we close today. If someone handed you an envelope tomorrow that gave you the chance to begin again, truly begin again, what would you build? What would you finally let yourself want? Leave me your answer in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this story found something inside you today, if it moved something or reminded you of something or made you feel a little less alone in wherever you are right now, please share it with someone you love. And subscribe to Auntie's Stories if you have not already. Because I have more stories to tell and I need you here to hear them. To every woman listening who has been told she is too old, too slow, too invisible, too finished. You are not finished. You are not even close. And the morning light does not ask your age before it comes through the window. Just comes. Every single day. For you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here with me today. Thank you for your time and your trust and your beautiful presence. You are seen. You are valued. You are needed. Exactly as you are. Right now. At whatever age you are carrying. This has been Auntie's Stories. Until next time, dear hearts. Keep going. You are exactly where you are supposed to be, standing at the beginning of the next right thing. God bless you. And keep you always. Dorothy Jean Abrams sends her love. And so do I. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And never ever let anyone tell you that your time is behind you. Because your story, just like mine, is still being written. And the best chapters, I promise you this from experience, the very best chapters are sometimes the ones that begin on a park bench with nowhere to go and everything still ahead. Good night, dear ones. This is Auntie's Stories. We'll see you in the next one.